Well, I suppose my headline would be, after discussion, how should we plant churches? It would be by remembering that God is sovereign and we are not. Having been an assistant minister in a diverse, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generation FIC church for a little under 4 years, Tim Keller came, I think it was in 1999, and did a conference on church planting while I was at that church. And that's what got me into thinking about church planting. And so my wife and our 3 kids, all under 4, headed to Glenwood, a suburb of Durban, in the province of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa in July 2002, to help plant a church. The congregation consisted of mainly white middle class, if not upper middle class South Africans. And then about a year after arriving, our church, Christchurch Glenwood, started an afternoon student congregation on the campus of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, consisting of mainly black students, many of whom would have come from townships. That was later followed by starting lunchtime student and mainly evangelistic meetings on 3 campuses over the next 2 to 3 years. I was also involved in teaching on a training courses we tried to better equip both lay people and those considering full-time ministry. Then, having decided to stay in South Africa for the foreseeable future, in 2010, while the World Cup was being hosted in South Africa, the Lord in his providence opened the door of opportunity for us to return to England to plant a church in London, the city I grew up in. And so, having sent my wife and now 4 kids on ahead, I arrived back in the UK in August 2011, having sold our house in Umbilo, in South Africa, and shipped all our belongings back to London. I joined the staff team of an affluent middle-class church in Dulwich. Then at the end of 2012, I led a group of around 30 adults and 30 children in planting a church in Brockley, that's SE4, in the area of South East London. And then 6 years later, having almost doubled in size, around 20% of that congregation of Gracious Brockley left to plant a church in Catford, an area about 10 minutes drive from Brockley, and yet probably even more different to Brockley socioeconomically than Brockley was to Dulwich. And one of the objectives of this plant was to try and reach some of the many West Africans that lived in that part of South East London. And I suppose I could fill the rest of my time with stories about how we got things wrong, how we didn't do stuff. But the thing I suppose I want to do is maybe burst the hotshot bubble a little bit. The new Top Gun movie is out, and I hear it's pretty good. I'm hoping to be able to persuade my wife to go and see it with me. But to quote a line from the original, released over 35 years ago now, I can't believe it's that long. I guess I want to help some of us to not let our egos write checks that our bodies can't cash when it comes to church planting. What I mean is, for some of us, our enthusiasm, our gifting, our drive, determination, and of course our love for the Lord Jesus, no doubt will cause some of us to secretly think of ourselves as potential mavericks of church planting. And by God's grace, he might use some of us to do really great things or leave a significant mark. But whatever the case, I think I've learned in ministry and in church planting that God is sovereign and I am not. You may have very fixed ideas about how and where you're going to plant. Perhaps you have studied the demographics of the area, who your target group are going to be. You've already spied out the perfect venue, and you think and you hope, perhaps, that you're the kind of leader that people will follow. I found Dan Steele's report, his article, sober reading, because all sorts of things can potentially thwart our plans and purposes. So I thank God that he is sovereign, but I am not. The passage that comes to mind is Acts 17, verses 26 and 27. While speaking in Athens, the Apostle Paul said this: God made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out to him and find him. So, God is sovereign, not you and me. So first, a few months into planting Christ Church Glenwood in South Africa, between 20 and 30 black French-speaking refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo started coming to our meetings. Not sure how or why. We're not planned for this, and we never saw it coming. Yet it was as if the Lord was saying, there you go, now deal with it. Second, we were trying to raise up future black leaders, and in those early days, some of those we had earmarked as promising or potentially competent leaders often fell by the wayside, stumbling morally or just character-wise. Those who came to the fore were those I personally didn't even notice in the first few months, even years. Yet the Lord was clearly at work in their lives, unbeknown to many of the more senior leaders like myself. Third, after planting Grace Church Brockley, my assumption was that we would start, before planting Grace Church Brockley, my assumption was that we would start a morning congregation. But as I scoured the area in the Brockley area of South East London, the only venue open to us meant we had to meet at 4 in the afternoon. That was not part of my plan, but it was clearly part of God's plan. Fourth, 9 months later, and despite having cultivated a good relationship with the facilities manager, we were kicked out of our venue because it was taken over by another sixth form organisation. We were meeting in the sixth form centre. I would later joke that Christ the King kicked out Grace Church Brockley. Fifth, ironically, the female Baptist Union minister of a church that attended the fraternal I also attended to get to know the local ministers, allowed us to use their building during the same week we were kicked out. Grace Church Brockley has been sharing their building ever since. It's now over 9 years. I say ironically because I think if the roles had been reversed, I'm not sure we would have responded with the same generosity of spirit as this female minister had done for us. And this reminds me of the following Tim Keller quote: "The sin in the lives of those of us with righter theology makes us worse than our theology should make us. And the grace in the lives of those of us with worse theology makes us better than our theology should make us." 6. I was fascinated to discover that the very first convert at Grace Church Brockley was a woman who, on the very first Sunday that we started meeting, just turned up. She didn't come with anyone. She'd not been invited by anyone. It would seem she just randomly turned up and was somehow converted. Well, I've got some convictions. I know she was converted. And then ironically, the woman who had been tasked with following her up by a one-to-one Bible study later admitted to dropping the ball as far as this woman was concerned. On a more positive note, Musa, who started attending our student church in South Africa and later transitioned to Christ Church Glenwood, served on the church council, was an apprentice, studied at a theological college in Cape Town, and is now leading a church plant in Joburg, in Soweto, Joburg, amongst other things. He's involved in a network not unlike this one as well, trying to stimulate church planting. Then there is Ryan, who is similar. The only difference is that he is now heading up the student ministry that he benefited from 20 years ago, like Musa, as a student at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. But Musa was supposed to plant in Durban, not Joburg. And Ryan, well, who knew? By the way, Ryan is white, and he's now heading up the mainly black student church. So what I'm saying, if you're a control freak or a micromanager, then you need to remember these words of both Isaiah and Paul. Isaiah, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. Paul in Romans, who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? The Lord's going to do what he wants to do. And you can either get on board with that or get in the way of that. When it comes to church planting, brothers, hold what you know. Hold all your plans in the palm of an open hand. When it comes to plans and what you think you know, such that the Lord can freely discard what he doesn't want. Be prepared to be like a Luke Skywalker. What Luke Skywalker does in when he gets his old lightsaber in that terrible movie, The Last Jedi. He can just throw it away. In other words, remember that you are not sovereign, brothers and sisters. The Lord is. Ultimately, he's in control, and not you. Notwithstanding all the stuff that we will learn and be helped by here today.